Tonight on the Carl Jackson podcast, Graham
Bronczyk.
I can't say his last name. You probably can't even say your last name.
Yeah, you know, it took some time.
That's tonight on CJC. Welcome to another episode of the Carl Jackson podcast. Thank you for watching us on CJC Network, on the Grid Network replays, and CJC2 replays, and on Spotify. What do I say, Amazon? I'm thinking about Amazon. I don't know why I'm thinking about Amazon. Anyway, thank you guys for watching us, man. I really appreciate you watching these episodes. We have the former creative pastor of Hillsong Church, California, with us today. His name is Graham. What's your last name? I can't say it right. I always struggle with your last name.
Like 5
I know, we practiced.
I still can't say it right.
You can't even say your own last name, right?
It's Bronczyk, I think.
His name, Graham
Bronczyk.
Bronczyk.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I said.
We'll just ADR that.
We'll just, I said it. See, I said it. I said it. What's up, man? How you doing?
You know?
How you doing, man?
I'm good, yeah.
So I wanted to talk to you today because Hillsong has been such a big part of the news the last really couple years. And with you being such a significant part of that ministry, formerly part of that ministry, I was curious about your take on the story,
right,
and your take on being a creative pastor. First of all, when you say creative pastor, what does that mean? Because a lot of people don't know what that means.
Sure. What does it technically mean, or what do you actually do?
Both.
Because they're different. No, creative pastor, I think it vary depending on what church you go to. I think for Hillsong, it kind of means you oversee, music and production, lighting, sometimes social media stuff could be rolled into that, any of the creative elements. But my specific role was a lot to do with worship. And so I led worship a lot. I'd oversee the teams of that, building those teams, leading and pastoring those teams. A lot of it has to do with event planning as well, pulling together who's going to be where, when, and did all the items arrive, and did we get speakers, and is somebody there to run audio, and do we have a photographer, and, is music set up, and what time is call time and rehearse? I mean, it's just all the stuff, event planning, but yeah. So. And
you did it for 3 different campuses in California, right?
I did, yeah, for a season there. So it was just Hillsong in LA for a while, and then we launched and did San Francisco and Orange County, and then I oversaw all 3 of those, and then kind of went through a crazy season in my own life, and we narrowed it down just to Orange County for the last little while. I think actually as a bit of a grace just to help me survive that difficult season that I walked through. But it was a lot to manage and keep track of. And
what was that like for you? First of all, having that type of job, what was daunting about it? I'm sure it was very daunting. What was the issue? Not gonna say issues, but what can be considered daunting about having your job? I should say, because every week it's changing, right? It's like a play, it's like a Broadway play that changes, though.
Right.
Every week, it's not the same play every Sunday.
Yes, yeah, it does, and I think at the end of the day, people are what matter most.
Right.
And so you've got this interesting tension between all the stuff that has to get done, as I said, all the things that have to happen, but it takes an army of people to pull this stuff off.
Right.
And so it's like making sure that they are cared for and loved and looked after more than the thing that's trying to happen.
Right.
And that's tricky to do. And honestly, it didn't do it well at all times.
Right.
I think as anybody does throughout life, sometimes I think did pretty well with it, and other times probably let the task become more important than the people, But that's definitely the tricky part. I think another one is just you're in sort of the public's eye in a sense, you're knowing that your life is being watched by people, and that it's you've got that title, you're pastor.
Right.
So it's everybody's holding you to a higher standard, and just feeling that internal pressure.
Right.
And even sometimes self-criticism about, I'm me when I go home, think like, man, I got angry at my kids again, or whatever it might be, and going, I'm falling short. So even that pressure and the pace of things. I mean, Hillsong's it's a fast-paced church.
Very fast.
As
Very
are
fast.
many big churches that it's a calendar that never stops.
So for you, I guess this is a great question. Was there a lot of pressure in that position on your family? Because you mentioned your kids, you mentioned you just recently got married?
Yeah, about a year and a half ago.
Congrats.
Remarried.
Remarried.
So, yeah.
You were married, how long were you at Hillsong? 10 years, 15 years?
So originally was in Hillsong in Australia, so 20 years ago.
I hear the accent.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. So it's my wife's, this is funny, my wife's South African, but she's lived in Australia for the last 20 years.
Gotcha.
And she still lives there. So we don't live together yet.
Oh, wow.
So we're still working on like
the green stuff.
Green card and all that. Oh,
Right.
yeah. So
Right.
yeah, I might have a little bit of an accent, but so I was there for
I love it, though.
three and a bit years. Moved here to California, helped plant a church for 10 years, did that same idea, creative pastor, and then was 7 years at Hillsong here in California.
So when you were in that position, you were married to someone else, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah.
So you said you went through a lot of personal things. We don't have to go into all details, but what pressures was it like in your first marriage to be, because you were married, right, during that time. What was that like? And then do you feel like that had anything to do with it ultimately, its demise?
Right. I do. I do think it had something to do with it. And I don't say that in like a point the finger kind of way.
Right.
I think I probably didn't handle the pressures of it well. And it was, if I'm being honest, it was exhausting. The pace of things a lot of times.
Right.
I'm kind of a more introverted person at times. Maybe you call me an ambivert. Like I can be extroverted, but like I get refueled being by myself and whatnot. So I think that type of role was draining for me.
Right.
And I think as often happens, you go home and your guard comes down. And I think my first wife didn't get the best of me a lot of times. Like she got the leftovers, and was busy a lot, was working a lot, was, and I think I self-justified it for like, this is for the church. This is for people, like people are encountering Jesus. Why aren't you on the same page? I think that's how I felt at that time. So yeah, I do think it played a part in that for sure.
Right. Do you, what's your take on the Hillsong scandals and the things that were happening? And I mean, obviously we've all heard about it in the news and in the papers. And what's your take on it? And what did you see now that you're no longer there? What did you see that was questionable to you?
Right. That's a good question. I think it's, as many things in life, it's complex. There's a lot of facets and angles and things. I've been friends with a lot of the pastors and of different locations and campuses for many years, and I know a lot of amazing people, truly. Even like the pastors here in California, I love them. They're good people, some of the best people I've ever worked alongside of. And I think it's to a degree isolated, like it, what happens maybe at one campus isn't necessarily what's happening or experienced at other campuses.
Right.
And so that, to a degree, it's isolated or pocketed. I think a lot of it comes down to truly pace. Interestingly, like again, what I was talking about a minute ago, it's so fast paced. There's so much happening.
Right.
It's like we don't have time to stop and sort that out.
Right.
It's working. We'll just kind of like keep moving. Let's just keep going.
Right.
And we'll kind of like, it'll get sorted in time.
It'll fix itself.
It'll fix itself.
Right. It'll melt out on its own.
Or hey, even like, yep, I gotta address that in next month's meeting or whatever, but then it doesn't get addressed, or it gets addressed and then it undoes itself again. I saw that happen over and over and over again.
Or it gets worse.
Yeah, totally. So I saw that happen, the ebb and flow of that over and over again, where it's like something gets fixed and then it kind of like unwinds again, and then it's like it gets addressed again a year later and then it kind of unwinds again. Right. But I even see that in my own life, just personally, like my own walk with Jesus, or my own, like work on something for a while and then it's like it kind of tapers back. So I do think there's a lot of people have made mistakes for sure. Absolutely. In regards to stuff that's happened, there's been things that should have been addressed that maybe weren't quickly enough. But I do think that a lot of it's been blown out of proportion. Like it's the real thing, but when you put a magnifying glass on it, the magnifying glass makes it look larger than it is. It's real.
Right.
It is really there.
Right.
You know, but through the optic and the lens that I think it's being seen because of news and publicity and that type of stuff, it's made bigger than it possibly is.
Right.
Or more sort of systemic, like the entire thing is bad, or you know, like this runs through every vein of every aspect, and it's not. It's like pocketed. It's like that one person there made some poor choices, but these 25 other pastors didn't.
Right.
But it looks like the whole brand, you know. So yeah, it can be a bit skewed in that sense, but I think a lot of people have learned a lot along the journey.
What did you learn in the journey?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think this whole last few years, not only walking through the divorce that I walked through, that made me question a lot of things and rattle a lot of things in my own life, and then walking through a pandemic, and then the racial unrest that was so prevalent and strong there for a while, and then just there's so many aspects and facets that have caused me to question: do I really know who Jesus is? Do I really know who God is? Who are you really, God? And I want to know who you are, not who I've grown up in church and I've got this Christian church idea of who you are. Let's strip it all away. I think that scripture, you know, all that can be shaken will be shaken. And it feels like an earthquake and a rattling has been happening in my own life for the last number of years. And truly, things have crumbled and fallen away. And I feel like I am almost rediscovering who Jesus really is.
What do you see him now as, Jesus? Yeah,
I think I've discovered his grace and his mercy a lot more.
Me too.
Truly, like, brings me to tears when I think about it. I'm like, man, you are kind. You are so kind, and you're so good to me. I think that...
And you've probably learned how to share that empathy and kindness to others in the process.
Oh, absolutely.
That's what I've learned. I've learned how to be more thoughtful of others in my journey.
Yes, absolutely. I think I used to be kind of as I said, jump to conclusions pretty easily in years past, and now I've learned that I'm just far more gracious. You know, somebody cuts you off on the freeway. Nowadays, my first response is, I don't know what they're walking through.
That's true.
They might have just got a phone call what I walked through, that their wife's like, I'm done, I'm out. And that guy's just, man, he's feeling it. Maybe he's crying and he can't see where he's driving. You know, like that's where my mind goes now. Just let grace be my first response.
That's good.
Let it be my knee-jerk response is grace, and then maybe find out more details later, rather than my knee-jerk response is judgment, criticism, and then maybe should have been a bit more gracious.
So your first wife, you said something just the moment I caught it. You said that she just up and left one day.
She not quite, but like it did feel like, you know, an event happened, and just one day to the next, I woke up and I go, I don't know you anymore. You've changed. You have just become a completely different person.
And that taught you grace.
It did.
Part of that.
It really did. Grace, yeah. It was almost like it highlighted my own, you know, flaws to me. It put a magnifying, as we were talking about, glass on my own flaws, which I think is okay when looking personally. And it allowed me to go, okay, I need to grow in these areas. Because, you know, in a marriage or any relationship or even a business partnership, both parties can continue to grow in different areas of their lives at any time. So in that time, I realized there's areas I need to grow in, you know. But yeah, it did feel very sudden. And honestly, I was like, okay, one day this life's gonna feel normal again. And then the pandemic hit and I went, life's just getting weirder. It felt like I woke up in an alternate reality, and it's just never gone back to the life that I previously was living. It's truly, it feels as though that life
it's like it never existed.
It reminds me of like Spider-Man into the Spider-Verse kind of thing. I'm like, I'm in an alternate reality. And I don't know how to get back to that other one. And, yeah, it's wild.
What does that feel like now? Because you're no longer there at Hillsong. You have a new wife. Who you're not in the same country with yet, but you're working on it. Talk a little bit about learning how to create in the new timeline,
Right.
because that's a process in itself. I'm going through it right now in my personal life, and changing timelines when you didn't choose to change that timeline in itself is daunting.
It is.
And if you're not careful, it can even drive you to depression. It can drive you through all sorts of thoughts that are just negative and not so great.
Right.
Talk about that process for you. What was that like for you to process changing timelines? I mean, you were on top of the world, Hillsong, you're doing your thing, got a great wife at the time, at least that's what you're thinking. Everything is going great. Pandemic hits all of a sudden, you're not at Hillsong anymore. You're doing, what was that process for you? In terms of accepting the timeline and learning how to build?
Right.
Because a lot of people need to know how to do that.
I think actually grieving, like seeing a lot of those things as like, because I think a lot of times, like if somebody passes away in our lives, it's like we go, well, there's a grief process for somebody dying, passing away. We've got to grieve that.
Right.
And but I think a lot of times these events are like that. They're like a death.
It's like a death, absolutely.
It's like that marriage, it's like it died. I lost that. And even the life that I once knew, that's dead.
It's gone.
And gone. I've got to grieve that. And so I think learning that grief process, interestingly, even in this new marriage, learning what a blended family is like, learning what a second wife is compared to a first.
Exactly.
It is not the same as a first marriage.
Not.
It just isn't.
It's just
and
not.
the more I'm studying and reading and learning, even the specialists in this are going, it isn't a first marriage. You won't ever have that again. It doesn't exist.
It doesn't
Second
exist.
marriages are just different.
Wow.
So yeah, grief and allowing yourself to go there, I think is huge. I've gone to counseling for probably the last 3 years now.
Right.
And that's been really a crucial piece of, I think, still standing.
Right.
I don't know if I would be if I wouldn't have had my counselors.
Right.
They've been so helpful. But I think the other thing is just believing that, well, I'll say this first. One other thing is the world's a big place. And when I look introspectively, it feels like I'm the only one enduring this.
Right.
And then I stop and go,
Wait a minute.
there are 8 billion people on planet
Absolutely.
Earth. And there are so many people that have walked the road that I've walked. And kind of finding a community, finding other people that have walked the journey ahead of you and going like, okay, people have made it, you know, they've survived.
Right.
And this is how they've survived. And so kind of keeping your eyes up in that sense. But then also my faith in Jesus.
Right.
That would be, honestly.
That's good.
And I don't mean that as a Sunday school answer. He's my rock. I'd be lost without him.
Right.
Yeah. I've turned to him and I have let him know my complaints.
He's like, I know your complaints.
Because I've told you over and over.
That's funny. So you do music too, right? You sing.
Yeah.
You do music. You produce.
Produce music. Yeah.
Wow.
It's kind of what I'm doing in life these days. Producing.
What's your
music
process in producing music? What is that like for you? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I love collaborating with people. So I know some people love to work alone. They love to do kind of from the beginning to end on their own for the most part.
Right.
I don't work like that. So I love to work with somebody who loves writing songs. I'm not like a blank page, start with nothing kind of a songwriter. I like to take a bit of an idea and develop it into being something greater. I love to take decent or good and hey, let's make that thing really good.
Nice.
So I love the refinement process. I love taking and just keep working. And then I love collaborating. So I can play guitar and bass and drums and sing, do all the stuff, but I would rather get a keyboard player in and a drummer in and a guitarist in, because we work together, we vibe off each other. And what about this? And then they try it, but they try it through their lens. And I love that collaboration process. And then I love editing as well. I actually really love getting all the stuff on the page, almost too much on the page, and then just cutting away. So I love the process from beginning to end. I'm probably a slow processor through that stuff. I don't like to rush things. I'm a bit of a perfectionist.
Right.
It has to be just right before I'm going to sign off on it.
Right.
Even the mix engineers, I'm like 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th revision, and they're like, bro, I charge for 3 revisions, and then it costs more after that. I'm like, come on, man, you sure that vocal couldn't be up 3 more dB and pitch slightly more to the right, and then the delay, you know, so. I can get pretty nerdy with that kind
You
of stuff.
did music with Hillsong too, right?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. So kind of done, vocals on different things and sang on a number of different albums and from anywhere range from choir and
Yeah, they have like 1,000 albums a week. Hillsong, man, put out more songs than Prince.
my
man.
goodness. Yes.
But Prince put out. I thought Prince put out records. Hillsong make Prince look like
even more.
Oh my God. What is that process anyway like at Hillsong when they produce records? Do they have like a whole music department that only do music? Is that kind of how it works? Or?
Yes and no. There's a core group of people for sure that are the kind of primary go-to people that are a lot of the writers and musicians and producers that, keep all of that flowing and whatnot. But it's still, in times past, it has been a big pool of people.
Right.
So it's like, you can't write a 12 or 13 song album twice a year.
Of course.
By yourself.
Right.
But if you got 10 writers, 15
you
writers,
knock
and
it
they're all
out.
strong writers,
Right.
like they're seasoned writers and producers and whatnot, well then you can do that. So
What makes a seasoned writer? That's a good point.
Yeah.
What makes a seasoned writer to you?
yeah.
Because Hillsong's stuff, it do be hitting. Mm-hmm. So what that's using my vernacular,
Yes.
my ghetto vernacular.
Yeah.
What makes a strong writer to you?
Yeah. I think authenticity is a huge thing when it comes to writing. Because at the end of the day, there are some songs out there in the world that's like, it's not necessarily the greatest song, but there's something very authentic about it, and it meets people where they're at, and
Absolutely.
they're feeling it. They're going, yes, I
Right.
get that.
Right.
So that would be one aspect for sure.
Right.
I think a writer that is willing to edit a lot. Like, I feel like a lot of
Not
times
be so close to an idea and think it has
it's
to
so
be this.
precious that it's
Right.
that it's this.
Right.
There's a time and a place for that where you like
Right.
really believe in a certain thing and you're willing to kind of fight for it a bit.
Right.
But I think willing to revise and edit and edit and edit. I think where a lot of songwriters actually fall short is they go with their first draft.
Right.
It's like, look, I wrote a song. And it's like, did you edit it at all or change it? Or it's like, no, that was the first draft I came of, and that's it. That's the finished song to them. And I go, no, you need to work on that thing.
Does it take time for you to edit, like days, or do you do it within a day? Can write a song?
Yeah,
What's
I've had both. So I've done writing sessions like in Nashville where it's like it's the machine for songwriting. My goodness, it is the machine for songwriting.
Is.
And so I've gone in and worked with producers and writers where you go into the room and 6 hours later you're expected to have a nearly finished demo.
Right.
It's like a full song with
Right.
music and tracks and all this stuff. So I don't prefer that process myself. I'm impressed by it. I think the work ethic is great. Like
Right.
really, it's amazing. But it's not my natural flow. I like to simmer on things a bit more.
Right.
I'd love to do that and then go away and really think about it and change it, refine it, and adjust
Right.
it. Because, I just think there's always another way to say something.
Right.
There's always maybe a better phrase or a better melody or bounce it off a couple more people. What do they think? How do they hear it? We had one song a number of years ago that made it on the radio, and it actually did quite well on the radio. And that song went through probably 5 revisions. We're talking
a song that you did?
Yeah,
What song was it?
it's called Echo.
Oh, you Echo? It's one of my favorites.
No, you've not heard that song.
I have.
Have you?
Yes.
Yeah, it was on it's like a dancey praise song kind of.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, I wrote that one with a few friends a number of years ago, and it did really well on the Christian radio,
Wow.
charts and whatnot. But again, how the song started, my goodness, it made 5 changes.
Right.
From that point.
In other words, you created a hit. You had to figure it out.
Right. I saw the gold in it, and I
Right.
wasn't willing to let that one die. But I saw the gold in it and went, I'm not going to leave it here because it's good enough that
Right.
it needs to be surrounded, all aspects, the verse, the chorus, the pre-chorus, the music.
Right.
It has to all be there because there's enough gold in it to fight for it.
Right.
So, it's a process. And it probably took, 6-7 months to get through that process.
Oh, wow. Oh, so you're a real songwriter.
Yeah. So.
So let me ask you this as we kind of wrap this up. The Hillsong, do you feel that whole legacy is done after everything that's happened?
That's an interesting question. Yeah. I think that I think that businesses, I think that brands, this is just my personal opinion, I think that, entities, they're like people,
Right.
We're born, we're small, we grow, we develop skills, we become an adult, we have a career, we do these things in life.
Right.
And there comes a time where we're hitting our twilight years and we're fading and we're not doing the work we were one day. And, I think brands are a lot like that too. And although Hillsong is obviously a church, it is a local church, it's all that, but
It's still a brand.
But it's a brand.
It is a brand, right.
In many ways.
Right.
And I think, you look at, Vineyard, you look at Maranatha,
Yeah.
you look at
That's true.
Calvary Chapel.
Calvary Chapel, right.
So many
That's
of them,
true.
and they've done wonderful things.
But they had that
But they-
moment
they
where
go up,
the lights dim.
And there's a drop.
Right.
I think it's normal.
Right.
I don't think it's like such a bad or scary thing. I think it's just the way the world is.
So you don't think any scandals of any kind would bring the light down? That wasn't what brought the light down. You just think it was
Well-
going to happen at some point, regardless.
Yeah, it's a good question too. I think maybe it's a combination of both. Maybe the timing of it has been expedited a bit because of
Right.
some of the stuff that's happened and how it's been
Right.
portrayed in the media and all
Right.
that. It's expedited how quickly things tapered off for sure.
How do you think the church is seen now with all of these scandals? I mean, we recently had Paul Krause Jr. on the show. He's talked about TBN. We got you here today talking about Hillsong. Like, what impact do you think this has made on society and the world? How is the church seen, in your opinion?
Yeah. And I love that you touched on that because like that's what breaks my heart in the biggest way. I have friends that aren't Christians, but they're aware of the church, or even some of them that like grew up in churches and they are not believers anymore.
Right.
And when this kind of stuff happens,
It just makes it
they
worse.
send it to me on Instagram and
Right.
they're like, "See, I told you."
This is the reason why, right?
I told you, yeah.
Right.
And that breaks my heart. That I'm like, it's validating to them. It's validating their opinion, and it's making them go, "See, I told you Jesus wasn't real."
Right.
And I'm like, like for me, I'm like, no, like let's dissociate Jesus with like the church,
Right.
like the entity, or like but yeah, I think it's painted things in a bad way,
Right.
and that breaks my heart.
How do we fix it, in your opinion? Yeah, that's a loaded question.
That's just a loaded question.
Yeah, that's a loaded question.
Yeah, it's it's complicated, but
Right.
we fix it by continuing to allow, truly at the core of it, continuing to allow God to get into the dark places in our hearts.
Wow.
The deep places in our hearts that are hidden.
Wow.
And that need to be healed and set free. I was just chatting with my mom a couple months ago about that. And, she's 73 years old now. And it's like, we were talking about it now. I'm 42, she's 73. And we're going, Mom, there's areas in our lives that we got to still deal
trying
with,
to fix, right?
It's not like she's 73 and like, well, it's all sorted now.
Right.
It's like, no, there's still things we're working through.
Right.
And I think at the end of the day, that is it. We've got to there's a lot of, I call them churchians, not Christians. Christian means Christ in me, little Christ. That's where that idea came
That's
from.
good.
We got a lot of churchians walking around out there. They look like church culture. They don't look like Jesus.
Woo!
Yeah. So I think we need to get back to, we look like
Wow.
Jesus. We actually look like followers of Jesus Christ.
Wow.
I'm a follower of his way. I don't look like whatever local church I happen to go to. Yeah.
That's how you end the show. How do people get in touch with you
I'm on.
and hear your music?
Yeah, I'm on Well, the music I've been releasing lately is a friend, Katie Miller of mine, and so we've released a few singles and album coming out soon.
Nice.
So I'm on Instagram, Graham Bronczyk, just at Graham Bronczyk on Instagram, and I'm refusing to get on TikTok or anything else. But
I am refusing to. I stopped at Instagram.
yes,
That's it for me.
yeah,
I'm not doing no more social nothing.
Yeah.
Trump even came out with one, the Truth Network or something,
Right.
a Truth thing, and I
Right.
was like, I got a page, but then I was like, to heck with this.
yes.
I'm not doing any
Yes.
more of these.
But yeah, Instagram is an easy way to find me. You can DM me on there. I was going to say about Ryan Tedder. So he's do you know who Ryan Tedder is?
Yeah, of
One
course.
Republic. Yeah, amazing songwriter.
Amazing.
He's saying though, these days, because the music industry's changed, if you're not blowing up your songs on TikTok, they won't blow up.
Oh, wow.
So that was it. That was it. So that was what making me think like, okay, maybe I do need to get TikTok.
Did on second thought, right.
But I'm like telling my kids like, but I can't dance, and they're like, Dad, it's not about dancing anymore. Like,
you know what's interesting about TikTok is TikTok has a different algorithm here than it does in other countries.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay,
So
right.
like here, it's all about entertainment.
Yeah.
In certain other countries, I won't say what countries, but
Sure.
in certain countries, it's about science and education, which I thought was very interesting.
Yeah, wow.
Y'all should look that up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Graham.
Yeah.
For doing this
Yes.
episode of the Carl Jackson Podcast, guys. And as always, I want to thank you all for watching us and keeping us alive. And I can't wait to see what happens in the near future and see how things are going to progress in our lives. And just remember what he said today. And I thought it was so powerful. Don't be a churchian. Don't be a Christian. Don't be a churchian, be a Christian, a Christ follower, because that's the key right there. If you're a Christ follower and you take on his energy, then all those other things that you struggle with will become a little bit easier to deal with, and you'll start showing empathy and grace and love to others. Until next time, be blessed. Carl, peace.
Bro.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Yes.
Good. That was
Ready?